Yeah, we're live. 11:21. Still technically the morning. So this is your morning wake up call or morning motivation. I'm gonna move my green screen over here forward just a little bit. It's a little bit distracting. I always try to do that beforehand. Sometimes I don't remember it. But today we're going to talk about compression ratio. More specifically, I've got some I got some interesting comments for people. So I want to recommend the Wallace Racing compression calculator to a lot of people, and that works very well. I go to it all the time. I use the calculators that they have online, which are great for. You can use it for displacement and compression. I mean, he's got all kinds of stuff. So it's really good and it's helpful. And the cool thing is once you go there once, you'll go there all the time. So you just start plugging things in. Well, what happens if I milled my 243 heads and took off 3 cc's or 6 cc's? And you could go and plug all that stuff in and see what change it has. And then you can decide, for instance, on cylinder heads, if I milled it this much, is it worth it? It costs this much. It's going to take away this much compression. How much is that going to change the, or it's going to take off this number of cc's? How much is that going to change the compression? And you can try to figure out, well, all that's nice on paper, but is it really worth it? But today what I want to talk about is on the thumbnail photo, and let's see, we're going to start our poll already. Okay, very simple poll. Can you tell what compression the piston is in the thumbnail photo? Can you determine what compression that motor has by that photo? And the reason that I'm talking about that, because I want to read to you guys and after you answer the poll, go ahead and tell me what you think the compression is in the comments. Let me know what you think that the static compression is on that motor, and then you might also throw in there why you might not know it. So I'm going to read you guys a comment, and this comment was on a test that I did with a 540. I think it was a 540 Dart motor. So it was an SHP motor that came from Dart, and it was a flat top piston with valve reliefs. And we did a bunch of testing on it. We ran a bunch of different heads. We ran blowers on it and turbos on it. It was actually a fantastic motor. Actually, one of my favorite big blocks, I think. And it worked very well. But one of my comments while doing a lot of this testing, because there's quite a few videos up with it. So we ran tunnel rams on it, and we ran blowers on it, and we ran a bunch of different camshafts, some big cams and some small cams and all kinds of stuff on it. And I have one gentleman who keeps insisting that I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm gonna read you his comment, because I told him that, or one of the comments that I made in the various videos is, this motor, when you measure everything and calculate it out, this 540 was less than 9-to-1 compression. It was in the high 8s. And so that made it very impressive that we were able to get the kind of power numbers that we were able to get from it, despite the fact it's being, it's a blower motor or a turbo motor, because it has the compression is in the 8.8 or 8.9 to 1 range. So it's very low. And then also one of the videos I did recently about it was about camshafts, about how you could put a really big camshaft in it and it will still work with that static compression. Because a lot of people think it doesn't work. They think, oh, those two things don't go together. No, it does. The camshaft is going to make power, and it's going to make power at this kind of RPM range, and it will do that at 7-to-1 or 8-to-1 or 9-to-1 or 10-to-1. It will just be more with all of those static compressions. I'm just trying to teach people to look at it differently than the way we have all been taught. Oh, no, that camshaft has to have 12-to-1. No, it really doesn't. What happens, and this is what people don't do and what I like to do, okay, you got to run 12-to-1 with that camshaft because it's a 278, 285 camshaft, and on a big block Chevy, you got to run high compression. Well, what happens if you don't? What happens if you have an 8-to-1 or a 9-to-1 motor and you use that big camshaft to make power up high? Because you want to make power at a high RPM, you want to have this low compression, you got plenty of head flow, you got plenty of displacement, and you got a tunnel ram with 2 big carburetors on it, and then you can make lots of power. Yeah, it would make more power with more compression, but we need to look at it like that. And instead of going, we have to run 12 to 1, because we don't. I know, I've done this many, many times. So the test that I did was about that. It was about running the big camshaft, despite the fact that this thing had low static compression. I said, look, the static compression on this motor was less than 9 to 1. And and I'm going to read you this guy's comment, because I want to talk about not particularly this guy or this comment, but this will help all of us understand, like, all of the data that we need to have, and why I have the thumbnail thing up there about there's no way to tell the compression. So the comment is, I double checked with Stroker kit offerings, and you are at 9.25 to 1 with a flat top piston and 120 cc head, just as I knew was the case, because he had made a comment previously about there's no way that thing is under 9 to 1. While you're doing YouTube videos, I'm actually machining and building them for a living, so I know based on my experience. I'm like, that's an interesting comment. Here's the problem with that, and this isn't the only time that this has happened. This happens a lot. I had when I was doing the porting on this is another good example. When I was doing the porting on the Dodge heads, and porting when I was doing the flow testing on the Dodge 2.2 heads, I flowed the bathtub head, or the early G head, and then also the what is it? What's the other head? The later, whatever the later head is. I forgot the name of it. The swirl head. And so I airflow tested both those, same setup, all that, made sure that all of that was right, and flow tested both of them. And I provided the flow numbers, because I wanted to see what they were. More for me, I wanted to see, because everybody talked about that there was a difference between those two, and that one was better than the other, and that the established thing is this one does this one, this one does this one. I'm like, okay, well, I want to see what it is, more so that I know I have a stock head, and then we poured it, and then I could see what the change was, flowing it the same way on the same bench and all that. Because I like to have a beforehand, just like when I run an NA motor and then I run boost on, I could see what the difference is. What did we gain in what did the boost add? How much did we gain per pound of boost? Did it follow the formula and all that? So just more information. And same thing with flowing. And so I flowed these two heads, and I posted the numbers, and everybody, well, not everybody, but lots of people made comments about it, saying, oh, that's great. That's good data. That's all fantastic. And then, but we do get a few guys that are saying, oh, no, that it's an established thing. We know that this does this and this does this. There's no way that that's right. And I'm like, look, if you were saying that I've flow tested 20 sets of these, and every time I flow tested them, here's what happened, then I would definitely look at that and go, hey, look, I probably made a mistake flow testing these in my setup, or if it's a different bench or a different bore diameter or whatever the thing is, I would definitely be open to that. But somebody saying that, we all know, we've all been taught for years and years and years that this is this, but there's no data to back that up. So, you're looking at a speculation versus flow numbers. And I'm not saying that my flow numbers are 100% accurate, but this is what I'm saying is this is what happened when I tested. I even went back and retested it. I'm like, look, it's still this. This is what happened. So when I did the thing that I did, here's what happened to it. But people wanted to argue with me about it. And so it's the same with this guy in the compression thing. Here's the problem with it doesn't make any difference whether you've been a machinist for the last 50 years, whether all that you've done are big block Chevys your whole life. You worked for, I don't know, Holman and Moody, or Warren Johnson on a pro stock team, or you build Top Fuel motors, or you're the best engine builder in the world. None of that makes a difference, because we're not looking at that or your experience or your knowledge or anything versus somebody who would have less than you. What we're looking at is you have no idea what the actual numbers are on all of these things that are going to determine compression. So you don't know, because you've never even seen this motor. All that this person has seen, just like with the cylinder heads, the guys never seen, the guys that are commenting about it weren't there during the flow testing, don't know exactly what these two heads are. They don't know what the chamber sizes are. They don't know any of that stuff. And it's the same thing with this big block. So the guy is sitting outside of the world where I'm testing this motor, has never seen it in real life, has no idea where the piston is at TDC, whether it's down, in this case, it was down about 3 or 4 thousandths. So he doesn't know that. He doesn't know what the thickness of the head gasket is. He doesn't know what the bore diameter of the head gasket is. He doesn't know what the measured chamber size is. He doesn't know what cc's. This is a flat top piston, but it does have valve reliefs. He doesn't know what the actual cc's of the valve reliefs are. And quite honestly, I don't either. I'm going by what the piston manufacturer said that they were. I didn't actually measure that. But we know that that's going to be close. And even if it's plus or minus 1 or 2 cc's, it didn't ever put this over 9-1. So the thing is, if you don't have the data, it's like if you don't have you weren't there while we flow tested it, or weren't there while I dyno tested it, or weren't there while I disassembled this thing, or while I assembled this thing, or while I measured it, there's no way for you to know what it actually is. So that begs the question, why do we make those comments? The comment isn't about providing accuracy or data. It's about something else. So the moral to all of this is, don't be that guy. We all want, it's all important for a lot of us to be smarter than everybody else, to know more than everybody else, or at least to appear so. But that's not the case. What you want to do is actually have the data. So if this guy reached out and said, hey, look, what was the chamber size? How far down was it, the piston in the hole? What was the gasket size? What was the compressed thickness? What was the bore diameter on the gas? All the stuff that you would need to know to actually calculate that. Then you would have the data. But I already indicated I measured all that, and I put that, because I don't care whether it's 8.9-1 or 9.1-1. That won't make any difference for what I was talking about. It did what it did with that thing all assembled. And the point of the test of the video that this particular case that he was commenting on had really nothing to do with that. It just said that you can run a camshaft with low compression. 9.1-1 and 8.9-1, for me, it all fits in the low compression thing. That fits in that description. You can run that. And because we're looking at the big picture here. We're looking at big things. You don't have to run it at 12-1. You can run it at 9-1 or less than 9-1. You can run it at 10-1. You can run it at 11-1. All of that will work. And that was the point of that video. So make sure when you're having, I've seen bickering going on in the comments before on many of them. And so when you're doing that, just make sure that you're making comments for the right reason. That's based on like helping the other people that are here. So let's see how our poll is doing. 92% we don't. So 8% of you are the people that just are pushing the opposite button of what the thing should be. So 8% of you don't actually think that you can tell me what the compression is. If you think that you can, tell me why that's possible. The Wallace Racing stuff is fantastic. I use it all the time. But if I haven't told you, make sure that it's the weekend. It's raining here, but still, that doesn't matter. Get something done on your project. It's project time. It's the weekend. Everybody's working for the weekend. Do you think the mile-an-hour to ET calculators are close? I do. I don't know how close they are to what your vehicle does actually, because a lot of times the mile-an-hour ET stuff is with an optimized launch and stuff. And I think that a lot of guys don't have that. I think the mile per hour and horsepower output probably is very close. Listen to the live shows while I assemble engines today. That's getting projects done. 10.25-1, 11-1. What would be the best turbo? There's like about 15 bajillion of them that will make that. Any sort of S475, 7875. Precision's got a bunch of them. All of them that are in that range will make 1,000 horsepower. I guess I need to look at the piston, but how am I going to tell what the compression is? Yeah, not enough for the story. Wish I wasn't at a party right now. Well, party on. Party on, Wayne. The Mark V Cortina S Estate calculator is accurate too. It's good for front-wheel drive horsepower to rear-wheel drive conversions and vice versa. I'm not familiar with that. Cannot tell without the head information. That's right, Vince. You can't. First of all, nobody knows what that bore and stroke are on that motor. Nobody knows how far the piston is down the hole. Nobody knows what size the dome is. Nobody knows what size the compression is. Nobody knows what size the gasket is. Nobody knows any of that. Big cam will bleed off too much compression, but it'll work, but it won't be optimal. See, you're still thinking from the other way, this way. You need to go from this way, that way. The camshaft will work with every compression. And how I know that is if you change the compression, you'll change the power output regardless of what camshaft you have. So if you have a small camshaft in there, assuming you have enough octane to make this work, if you have a small camshaft in there and you change from 8 to 1 to 10 to 1, it's going to add power. If you have a big camshaft in there and you change from 8 to 1 to 10 to 1, it's going to add power. One of those isn't going to work better with one kind of camshaft. It just changes it everywhere, just a lot like Boost does. Compression is determined by the stroke, the piston, and the head. Without all three variables, there's no way to accurately assess compression ratio. That's right. What was Brian's answer? Maybe I'm not seeing a Brian. Oh, there's Brian. 99 to 1. 10 cc head on it. It's going to be hard to fit big valves in that. Everyone wants more power. That's why we pick long tubes over short tubes. I've seen more pistons than most people have had hot dinners. Del West gave me the breakdown on the tie valves. I cut them down as long as I can cut them down as long as I use a tool steel cap. He said I would need someone who has worked with cutting down the valves before. Put a 39-degree back cut on it for what I'm down. Does that sound right on the back cut? Piston in the thumbnail is a pro piston with an 18 cc. I don't know. Let me see. See if I can enlarge this a little bit. The part number is 13729-060, so we know that it's 60 over, if that helps you. The piston dish can be measured photogrammetry. All of that's nice, Dean, but that even if you could 3D model the piston, that's not going to tell you what the compression is because you don't know anything else. The part number's on the top of the piston, but it's not hard to Google it. Good, you can Google it and you can find out what the effective dome size is, but it's not going to tell you what compression is. Land surveyor. I did that too with my dad, and we did hydrographic surveying too. Oh, and I wanted to recommend it's an Instagram page that I had followed. Oh, here it is. It's Boxa Diesel. Have you guys heard of it? It's BOXZA_DIESEL Diesel. So they do really cool, like little turbo diesel builds, and they're really nicely done. And they use them for those little Thailand river boats or whatever. It's awesome stuff. But they do more than that. They do a lot of diesel stuff. So if you guys haven't seen it, BOXZA_DIESEL diesel. So check those guys out. So a shout out to those guys, because I've watched their stuff and it's really, really cool. There's nothing better than seeing a really high boost compound turbo diesel attached to a big long prop shaft and stuff. Yeah, Dean, you can randomly guess the variables, but you'd be randomly guessing the variables. The flat top of my 4.8 comes out of the block. That's not unusual at all. The lot of the factory OEM LS stuff is like that. They can be out as much as 10. Most of the ones I've measured are 5 or 6. Have you ever done a bearing clearance dyno test, like running a motor for baseline and then loosening the rod and main bearing clearances, and they'll retest the motor? I don't think you're going to see much of a change in power. You might see a little bit of a change in oil pressure, but I don't know how much you're talking about loosening it up, like a FOW or something. Salvador wants to know if anybody knows how to connect the next 2-step to a switch. Let's see. Some calculators even tell you input the ring height from the deck. Yeah, because that's all clearance area. Richard, do you have any dyno data on using RecPort 6.0 or 6.2 with the new BTR Red Hot cam? According to them, it works well, but it seems small. The Red Hot cam actually is that's one that they actually designed for their LS3 stuff, and I think it worked really well. I don't have any tests on that because I haven't run that combination yet, but Brian has a bunch. I think that Red Hot cam will work better on that combination than it does certainly than it did on the 5.3. Got an 87 Chevy C1500 with 71,000 original miles from the 30-year owner. V6 standard trans. Sounds like a great turbo. I don't think that any of those were that high. So Honda Tech, what heads do you have on there? Because I know that Dean, in his infinite speculation, didn't ask that question. He doesn't know what head gasket you have on there or what head chamber you have on there or any of the other data. But if it's a stock motor, you should assume that it's probably pretty close to stock compression ratio. You have 241 heads on your, well, that's going to throw it off. 241 heads on your Felpro, blue Felpros. I think we need more information than that. The color is interesting, though. And a 241 head is going to lower the compression on that 4.8. BC, that's a good point. Not just head gasket thickness, but none of them are 100% round. You need actual volume because a lot of head gaskets will actually have like notches. They'll have valve notches in them. Most of the gaskets that you buy have a compressed volume in addition to the thickness. They give, like Felpro lists that on their on their packaging, so we know what that number is for the gaskets that we're using. So Harry, here's a question for you. I know that you're thinking that there'll be less, that the pressure would be lower, but the flow rate of the pump will go up if the pressure is lower. So does that make work harder on the? Does that make the pump work harder or easier? What's the LS compression limit using 93? I don't know what you mean. There's so many variables there. Have you played with DSS pistons? I've run those in the past. Curious if their X groove skirts really help with cleaning and lubricating cylinder walls. Haven't tested that though. Octane, I got a build sheet from a builder and it states it on the build sheet that the compression is 11.4 to 1. When I use the build sheet data in different calculators, I get compression ratios, different compression ratios, including up to 12.1 to 1. You shouldn't get different numbers with different compression ratio calculators if you plug in the same numbers. That should always be the same. Does your build sheet list everything that we've talked about that's pertinent to, determining what your actual compression ratio is? So Honda Tech, you jumped out of the chat and did a like. Good. That's what we like. We like the likes. I had somebody comment, I guess it was yesterday, that said that he was fed up with. I think he's mad because I think it was a motor engine guy. I think so, but he was fed up with me not being accurate in my description, and that he has strongly disliked. I'm like, you. So I commented because it's fun. I said, that I thank you for your dislike. I said, that a dislike counts the same as a like, so they're always appreciated too. So I hope he's like, Richard. How do you feel about sealed rings? Do you mean zero gap rings? Can you recommend a desktop dyno version of? I don't use desktop dyno, but that is available. But the Wallace Racing thing is something that you don't have to have. You just go there to his site and then you just plug in the information. Turbos are good. I had a game on my computer called Desktop Dyno. It was made like in 1995, and I believe it to be 125% accurate. That's a lot of accuracy. Minnesota's cold up there, huh, Justin? VWs have no head gaskets and only 12 to 21 foot-pounds of torque on the headsets. Don't they have isn't it an overlapping sleeve or something on the four-cylinder heads, on the Honda head? I mean, on the VW heads? It's Wallace Racing. Wallace Racing compression calculator. Or they actually have all kinds of calculators. 17 degrees. That's like sweater weather, like sweater vest. 12.5 times out of 10. That's good. Does anyone use copper spray? I do when we reuse a beat up wonky gasket. I'll use copper spray on that. Any recommendations for a 4L60 500 wheel horsepower for the street? Someone reasonably priced. So you want to, does anybody have a recommendation for Roman I think you're wanting a 4L60 trans is what your question is, right? The 500 wheel horsepower is pretty easy to get. The combination would be a 5.3 turbo deal. or even a 6-liter NA would be hard to get that kind of power. It'd be really expensive. Anything with boost is 500 wheel horsepower is like easy breezy. $17 outside and $55 in the shop. So all you got to do is go outside for a little bit and sit back in the shop. You're like, man, it's nice in here. Wallace and Gromit Racing, exactly. The curse of the were-rabbit. I had some good success with gapless Napier second rings. Okay. So Camaro LT1, Roman has some recommendations for you on the transmissions. How do you feel about zero gap rings on an NA? They work, but they're not better than a gap ring. I think Dan said that he's tested them on the higher level stuff. I put them on my my Engine Masters motor, but I didn't ever test them about anything else. I think the guys from Total Steel gave me the ring, so we ran them. I wasn't at a point while I was doing that I was looking at power from rings yet. We just selected a ring tension that I wanted to run. I don't even think I used. I don't think I had gas ported pistons in that. It's been a long time. I can't remember. I don't think I did. I was looking at so many other things that wasn't one of the areas. I know a guy with 650 flywheel and he put down 530 wheel horsepower through a 5,000 stall automatic. That's a pretty high stall converter. Was that an NA thing or something? Do you have a link to your Engine Masters build? I think that the motor might be up there. This was long ago. They did 410-inch motors, and we ran back with the guys at where was it at? Like World Products or something? Because they had one of them at West Tech, but this wasn't there. This was back east. So we had to fly in and crate and ship the motor over there. It's cheese, Gromit. That's right. Yes, I was a finalist. I was in the top 6, and they unfortunately melted my motor down for me by not turning the water on. It's a long, sad story. Building a Dragon Drive 6096 Camaro, running a 5.3 turbo, stock bottom end, gap rings, new bearings. Would be safe to say 750 horsepower. Yeah, that should be easy to do. Any sort of cammed 5.3 would be easy to make 750. My small block Chevy has an NA cam. Harry, those numbers are not at 50, right? Those are advertised numbers. How will the large intake duration being an NA cam react after adding boost? Does it bleed off boost? No, you don't have to worry about that. That's actually a very good. I'm assuming that's not that it's not a 292 300 at 50. That it's not that big because it would have more lift if it was that. So that's an advertised number, but that NA camshaft will work really well with a centrifugal blower. And then a max effort 383. Okay, I was wondering why the stall speed's so high, but that makes sense. Richard, do you need to calculate fuel injector loss for nitrous like you would for what do you mean fuel injector loss? What are we losing with fuel injectors? Harry, will it shift the power band up? A centrifugal blower will tend to shift the power up. It'll still make power at the RPM that you're running it to right now, but it will continue to make power past that because you're artificially increasing airflow into the motor at a rising rate. So you're increasing boost and increasing flow past that, obviously assuming no belt slippage. But you can shift there. If you want to shift there, you can shift there. It will be making good power. And if you want more boost, you can also change the pulley and keep the RPM at 7,200. How do you feel about the thermal barrier coatings on the inside of an EFI intake runners? I would like to test that. I would like somebody to show me that that actually does anything. Recal is in the house. How's our poll doing? 89. The yeses are sneaking in there. I want to see if there's a way that I can see the. No, I don't want to do that. I want it to list. I don't want it to be. I want the list of people that are voting yes and voting no, so that we know who to get rid of. L77. The L77 is a 6-liter aluminum block, according to On All Cylinders. They have lots of good information. They did a bunch of looking up. 10.4 to 1, 362 horsepower, 391 foot-pounds, used in police pursuit vehicles, Commodores, 2011 to 2017. I'm curious to see what head is on that. I'm assuming it's a rec port. So 58X, yeah, it is a rec port head. So it's a lot like an LY6. Well, Dean, we would expect nothing else from you. What is my opinion on oilless turbos? I've only ever tried to run one and it blew up, but maybe they're better now. You can get intake gaskets that are made to keep heat from the heating the intake, but I can find them mostly useful for small spacing. The fact that you have a ported head you can take off. Here's the thing here's what you should think about. Like these phenolic spacers that we use to run in the 5-liter Mustang stuff. Anytime you're trying to isolate, well, first of all, you're when you do that, you're only isolating the upper intake manifold. The lower intake manifold is still getting all the heat. And I would argue with a closed hood that the upper intake manifold is also getting heat. It's getting radiant heat from the engine compartment, which is also very hot. And it'd be interesting to see if you did thermal mapping in there while the thing's running around of what the various temperatures are. So and there are two things going on. One is, what is the temperature differential from you putting an insulator on it? Does it do anything to the external temperature of the manifold? Does it make it run cooler than it would without it? That would be the first thing. The next thing, and this is even more important in my opinion, is does whatever change in temperature, if you got a change in temperature, a change in external temperature, does that manifest itself as a change in inlet charge temperature going through the motor? Because I would bet that it doesn't. Because I would bet if you change the temperature externally degrees, that you see no change in internal air temperature. Can a stock Gen 3 fuel pump run Snake Eater 80s? It will run the injector, that size injector at 43 pounds, but at what power level? At what flow level? Having bigger injectors at any given flow level will make it easier on the pump rather than the pump having to run a bunch of pressure. But if it's a stock regulator on it anyway, you need to figure out how much power you're trying to feed and then determine whether the fuel pump can do that. I'd love to hear your opinion sometime regarding what works for big power on a dyno with stock parts versus what you'd consider for in-vehicle longevity. Do you mean that we can make it do something one time on the dyno, but will it continue to work out on the street? I think that's been proven over and over again by lots and lots of guys that are out racing these things, is particularly on LS applications, that you can run a stock bottom end with ring gap, with a stock head, with springs and a camshaft, and the right injectors and intercooler and pump and tune, and then a good sized turbo. And you can go out, run it at 1,000 horsepower level. Guys do that on the street and at the strip all the time, and use it a lot and use it for a long time. So I think that works fairly well. I think the guys that break that stuff, I don't think that they break it because the motor wears out or because it didn't have enough strength. I mean, I think you could eventually get to that point. I think you would lose ring seal first, and then maybe you just put another set of old bratty gapped rings in it. But I think when most people hurt these things, it's not because because it had a stock rod or a stock piston in it. I think they hurt it something else. I think they hurt it because of the tune, or because the wastegate line came off, or whatever kind of thing that had nothing to do with just it being like a strength issue. Stock pistons, push rods, trunnions, all of that will work. I'm trying to understand what engine is what when convening from United States to Australia. Yeah, the nice thing about if you go to On All Cylinders, that's a thing for Summit Racing. They list, like this listed the Australian stuff as well. VW cylinders fit into register in the head. The top of the cylinder is machined flat and fits flush with the head when the engine comes up to operating temperature. The actual torque is okay. So, BC, you're talking about the coolant temperature raising inlet air temperatures? Yep, don't be that guy. I do know the piston in the thumbnail is a 60 over probe. Yeah, we went over that already. We all saw the part number on there. I also did plus 4 cc domes on my 6 liter and did a compression ratio calculation and keeps coming up with 1.38 to 1. You have something in there that's not correct. Yeah, and Spellcaster, the other thing is that even if we know what the piston is, we don't know what the compression is. Because we don't know any of the other things that we need to know for compression. Richard, can you do a 530, 2050 horsepower test? Yeah, do you want to do that on an LS? I've run viscosity tests. Did I miss anything good? No, you're good. Just make sure you go up and vote no in the poll. Barry, I don't know what cam is in that 394. I have some 393-ish test motors up on some videos up on those, so you can kind of see where those were. Nice, Butcher. Yeah, Dan, that's how everybody ended up with 020s. Less viscosity is usually adds power, although it's not. I'd never seen significant changes. Richard, how did you control ignition timing and fuel on your boosted 5-liter? Are you talking about my street car back in the day, or how do we do it on the engine dyno when I run them now? Back in the day on my Mustang, we had a Crane Interceptor. We also had the fueling was FMU to start out with and 24-pound injectors. And then it was a Pro M meter and 36-pound injectors. And also BTR, boost timing retard. But you need to run the oil based on bearing clearances. So if I do an oil viscosity test, I have to change the bearing clearances. No, that's not going to happen. Good looking pistons, lots of room for big valves. Yeah, that's why we did that. We ran some pretty good sized cams, I think, on that motor. Just heat soak in general. The small block Chevy and the small block Mobile are all designed with the carburetor. The heat help fuel atomization. For low speed cruising, you're talking about, or are you talking about wide open throttle? I don't know. Is Crane still in business? Does anybody know? I thought that they were. I know Comp bought them. Peter, you asked about the 4-inch spacer. Remember on the 671, they advertised a 50 horsepower gain with a 4-inch spacer under the blower. I don't know why it would do that. I'm gonna ask Brule. He may have tested it. He's done a lot of blown big block boat motors. Do you have any suggestions on LS tuners on the East Coast, preferably around Georgia? I don't know a lot about tuners in different areas. Harry, I would think you could get 15 or more from a dry sump. Yeah, Andy, S&S thing was long ago. Comp bought Crane after that. Bob Crane from Hogan's Heroes. Richard just figured out my daily driver 87 TBI Chevy truck has a lock distributor. Is that bad? No, if it's fuel injected, they normally do lock the distributor because it's controlled. It's controlled with a computer, so it's not technically locked. The distributor's locked mechanically, But what they're doing is, and we do this on every EFI distributor combination that we run a lock distributor, and then we just adjust the timing with the computer, and your computer does that. Harvey Crane was the cam guy. Yeah. Bob Crane was from Hogan's Heroes. I have a small but Chevy Fireball cam I saved for a regrind. Somebody probably bought from PAW. That's right. Yeah, Bob, 4-inch spacer with an intercooler outside. That's what I was wondering. 50 horsepower from an intercooler would be a pretty good gain. Just from an open thing, I don't know why that would change it, but I would be certainly willing to test it, though. So we're going to close out our poll at 89%, saying no, you cannot tell what the compression of that piston is, which that should be 100%. For those of you who are not in on it being 100%, you are all off the porch. Have you or anyone here ever run Silverlight pistons? Yes, we have on stockish or even mild performance rebuild stuff. We've run those. Do you need to derate injectors for nitrous like boosted applications? No, unless you're using the. I take that back. Most nitrous setups, like if you're running, for instance, if you're running a wet EFI setup where you're adding the nitrous and the fuel, that has no effect on injector flow rate. If you're running a dry setup where you're adding the fuel through the injectors, the calculation would be different because most of that is still NA power. And you're only richening it up for the last part of that. And obviously on a carbureted combination, you wouldn't do that. So no on a wet EFI, no on a fogger, no on any kind of individual port fogger. Injector flow rate might come down a little bit if you're running a dry setup. I've run 0-20 on several vehicles of mine and had no issues, but I never disassembled the engine and looked at the bearings. Nope, if you're off the porch, you don't get to look after Milo. How much parasitic loss would it take to drive off the crank to drive an F1? I don't know which F1 is an F1A94. Is what supercharger is it? And I would be very surprised if it's only 80 horsepower. I would think it'd be much more than that. Spellcaster, you can go thinner oil and get away with it, but really thick oil with tight bearing clearances can burn up bearings. What kind of pistons did you get for your 2.5? The 2.5 has Weisskos on it, or has a box of Weisskos sitting on it, literally, because they're not in that motor yet. Have you tried water injection with fogger kits? They're not running water injection with a fogger setup, right? An F1A, is it just an F1A and not an F1A94? So if it's just an F1A, the only way to test the blower really would be to run the blower on a blower dyno. And that can be done. So you run it at the combination of blower speed and boost pressure that you want. That's not something you do on the engine dyno. Got representatives from Kiwi land. 2 more minutes. You guys got stuff to do. You got to go out and get stuff done. As do I. I've got to go watch the. So if I have people here from Australia, congratulations, Australia right now, or at least we're getting. I think Lisa. I'm not even going to say it because somebody's going to ruin it for me. Harry, you can't just unhook the charge pipe because that doesn't tell you anything. That changes the flow rate dramatically. You'd have to do it. You'd have to restrict the charge pipe to produce the desired boost level that happens while the motor is running. Like we did a dyno sweep, you'd have to mimic the boost level and flow rate out of that blower while it's running. You can't just free flow it because the amount of drag would be different on a free flow situation. Carrie, you don't have an opinion on dynamic compression ratio? I think it's one of the things that people can look at to determine. I think a lot of guys use it as an absolute to determine, oh, if you have this dynamic compression ratio, you can run this like octane fuel. That's nonsense. That's not the only thing that determines it. Because what if you have an optimum dynamic compression ratio and then you have 200-degree inlet air because you're grabbing it from right behind the radiator? That's where you're wrong. Once I'm at work staring at 4 monitors, I've got nowhere to go for the next 4 hours. Eric, it's too cold outside. There's a video on YouTube with a turboed wood stove running wild. I've seen those. Those are really cool. I just salute people that, like, whoever the first guy is that ever came up with that. I think that's awesome. Like the first guy that made one of those into a jet engine. That had to have happened like long, long ago when they were, I'm sure, when they were first developing turbos, but it was probably what's the guy's name? Schweitzer, maybe? I'm trying to remember back from my turbo books. Jordan, the first thing you should do on an LS3 obviously is a cam and springs. You can't call all the power needed to drive a blower parasitic. Much of it is useful. No, it supplies more than it uses, but it does cost power to do that, and that's our definition of parasitic loss. How much power did it take to add that extra power? If we got a 200 horsepower gain, if there was 100 horsepower worth of parasitic loss, we would have had 300. Yeah, the turbo stove thing is awesome. Awesome sauce. Blower lower intake horsepower claims. One place Alky Digger lists the Holley Hiram below an 871 adds 150 horsepower over a standard short cell. Yeah, but that has Tom, that has nothing to do with volume though. They're talking about an opening below the blower. That's just added plenum volume. Doing a high ram is a tunnel ram test versus a very short runner intake manifold. And we've done that test. Freiberger did that not too long ago with a blower on his big block. And we knew that it was going to add power because it adds a bunch of power NA. But so that's a different test. And 150 horsepower seems like a lot there, but a tunnel ram will definitely add power over a, this much runner length versus this much runner length. That's definitely going to change the power curve. Can you ceramic coat the inside of the hot side of the turbo? I don't know what the thickness is on the coatings, but you probably could. I've seen the turbo stoves, but what do you do with it? Well, you just have all your friends gather around and watch it and point at it and drink beer, I guess. Steam locomotive power output was greatly dependent on induced draft into the firebox. I think I would have been a good coal shoveler. Recal, you got roosters? Send the dogs out. Release the hounds. I don't know, Terry. I don't know about the F1. We've run the F1A94 and the D1SC a bunch. Those are really the only two I have a whole bunch of experience with. But the F1A94, we know will go to 1300, and it might go more than that. Yeah, you just if you were trying to make the train go faster, you would just do what Doc did on Back to the Future, right? Back to the Future 17 or whatever it was. Yeah, just shovel coal and and nitromethane. Just turn on the oxygen bottles in there. And on that note, it is time to go. I gotta go watch some soccer. Is it true that if you add a 175 shot of nitrous on a supercharger, it will give you more? It'd be more apt to do that on a turbo than it does on a supercharger. When we've done it on like centrifugal superchargers, it seems to add the same amount. But on a turbo, it tends to add more, sometimes because it raises the boost. And on that note, it's time to go. Pow, 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 pow. Have a good day.